Okay, hey guys, this is Mr. Spiegel, and this is our second part of the civil rights. A quick reminder, this is our big idea or essential question. What were the goals and tactics of the different leaders of the civil rights movement? So, quick reminder, we talked about Rosa Parks as well as Jackie Robinson. Today we're going to focus on Martin Luther King Jr., and then we'll get to Malcolm X and Black Power in our third video. So, Malcolm X will come later, but Martin Luther King Jr. is today, and he is born in Atlanta, Georgia, and his family is middle class and compared to most African Americans at the time, pretty wealthy, and so he attends Morehouse College with a bachelor in degree of sociology. Proof, people, that social studies is important. Good stuff. And he is mentored there by a guy named Benjamin Mays, and really advocates or kind of incorporates civil rights understanding in him as a young man. Later he heads to Boston, which is probably his first experience in a desegregated context to a large degree, and gets his PhD in systematic theology, so he is a Christian theologian. And at the young age of 26, we'll see a lot of leaders at this time emerge pretty young, and he becomes the pastor of a pretty famous church, the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. Very different than Georgia, Atlanta, or Boston. So, and really this comes to prominence when the bus boycott, which we discussed in the last video, takes place. He becomes an early leader. And in '55, he helps found this boycott and really begins his incredible career then. And most importantly, he delivers powerful speeches. This is what he's best remembered for. And he's kind of the voice of the civil rights movement to some degree. And really that's epitomized in the March on Washington, which we'll hear in just a little bit, and delivers probably one of the most famous speeches coming from an American, at least in the 20th century. I Have a Dream. However, it's interesting at the time that JFK really warned the civil rights leaders against doing such a thing. He thought that might bring even more protest and roadblocks to civil rights legislation in Congress. But 20,000 people pack the mall in Washington, D.C., and we're going to hear a little bit about it. But before that, a little bit more background that King is jailed several times. We can see this is his mugshot. So a lot better than some online mugshots you might check out. And he helps found an organization called the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, or the SCLC. And this group still exists today. So this group uses the authority and the power that black churches, because churches at this time, and to some extent even today, are segregated informally, and to organize using nonviolent protests and to support the civil rights movement. So churches became kind of the natural hub of civil rights movements all around the country, but especially in the South. And King uses the Gandhi playbook. He realizes that nonviolent civil disobedience works in India with Gandhi, and really begins to put that philosophy into practice. However, a little bit later on, we'll see that that comes with some pretty big consequences, and most importantly, violence will be used against you, even if you choose to be nonviolent. And civil disobedience leads to media coverage. We'll see, like I said, a little video here in a sec, about the inequalities that Southern blacks suffered in really television. This is going to be the big key, that it gets out there in the mass media, and really people begin to be sympathetic for the civil rights movement in the early 60s. And King, we'll read this in class, writes a classic. It is a beautiful illustration of just Americans at their best. He writes a letter from jail. Several famous historical figures write from jail, and he responds to a letter sent to him by some clergymen saying, we need a call for unity. And basically they said that the injustices were occurring in Birmingham, sure, but why not battle in the courtroom rather than in the streets, right? Because they had had success with Brown versus the Board of Education and a couple other courtroom cases. And King decides no, that the jailing of him and just the injustice that exists must and justifies civil disobedience. And man, by saying that without forceful action, true civil rights would never be achieved. Direct action is justified in the face of unjust laws. That is really the heart and the definition of civil disobedience. And these are some groups that you should be familiar with. We talked about the NAACP here in the past. Was founded by W.E.B. Du Bois and really represents an early push for civil rights. The Southern Christian Leadership Conference, like I said, started by Martin Luther King and others, and really an offshoot of that would be the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. This is really SNCC, is made up of college-age students, and the Congress of Racial Equality Corps will come on a little bit later. So here are some snippets from the letters from the Birmingham jail, and I'm going to let you read these, so if you want to pause it, these are just solid, rock solid snippets from his letter. Like I said, we'll read part in class, so go ahead and pause it right now and read these. Okay, so hopefully you read those. And moving on, like I said, more than 20,000 black and white Americans really celebrate a day of songs and music and prayer and speeches, and it's kind of ended with its climax with the speech by Martin Luther King. If you can see all these little heads, that is a lot of people. Anyways, so his speech, the I Have a Dream speech, really is eloquent. You'll hear in just a moment. And essentially stating that he desires for blacks and whites to coexist equally. Really, it's historical rhetoric, but also kind of an example of a black Baptist sermon style. So because he's a preacher, he continues to do that in speeches. He uses quotes and metaphors from the Bible, from the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Emancipation Proclamation. So really these sources add to the symbols and the poetic kind of nature of his speech. So here is the speech in text. I'll ask you to follow along as you listen to the speech.
This nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat.
Sorry, anticlimactic recording issues, and back to King.
With the heat of oppression, be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
I don't know about you, but that was freaking awesome. So Martin Luther King delivers it like few people can. His words really catch the nation just where it is. And so really this also brings up a separate issue that we're going to talk about, and that is the Brown versus the Board of Education decision said that separation is inherently unequal. And so in 1952, this was kind of the map of segregation in schools in particular. So we can see up here that segregation is prohibited and kind of a checkered thing, that the West and the Great Plains don't have any legislation on the books, and that here in a little bit of the West, but definitely in the deep South, segregation is required. But the problem is that's now illegal. And what do you do? How do you integrate schools? And the story of Ruby Bridges comes along, and she's 6, and she was the first to attend a white school. So she integrates into the school, and due to the opposition, Ruby actually needed to be escorted to school every day by federal marshals. This seems like a bit crazy today, but people were nuts. And when she entered the school, a lot of teachers refused to teach, and many white students went home. But Ruby had perfect attendance. And here is a famous painting by Norman Rockwell titled "The Problem We All Live With," and basically being escorted by armed guards. We can see a tomato here plastered on the wall behind her, and little girl is just trying to go to school. But a brave act by a little girl, only 6 years old. I don't know about you, that would seem like a pretty crazy thing to do to try to go to school, but nevertheless, that is, she paves the way for other kids to go to school every day without problem. She was the sole person, like I said, to attend a New Orleans elementary school in 1960. And there she is today. So Ruby Bridges a couple years ago. And just to review some of the main ideas that we talked about is MLK's leadership, is vocal and oratory skills, but also his idea of civil disobedience and nonviolence, his letters from the Birmingham jail, as well as these civil rights organizations, the NAACP, the SCLC, the SNCC, and CORE. The March on Washington really epitomizes and is maybe the peak of support and public interest in the civil rights movement, and that is capstoned by the "I Have a Dream" speech, which we heard. And then the story of Ruby Bridges, a little girl trying to go to school. So a lot of this draws sympathy from the American public, and that's where we're going to pause and watch a video in which I'm going to demonstrate what might be on the nightly news. Okay, so part of the civil rights movement was a technological breakthrough, and we'll see that the American public becomes much more knowledgeable about what is going on, and particularly in the South, and the treatment of African Americans. Here is a brief clip from somewhere in Alabama in 1963.
Say to 10% of the population, you can't have that right. Your children can't have the chance to develop whatever talent they have. But the only way that they're going to get their right is to go in the street and demonstrate. I think we owe them and we owe ourselves a better country than that.
Okay, there we see firefighters hosing down civil rights protesters in order to try to disperse them, and over that was JFK speaking about the issue that really this should not be the case, that people should have to fight so fervently for their freedoms, but nevertheless an advocate for civil rights. JFK was backing this incident and often with federal resources. So that's kind of a snippet of the middle game of the civil rights movement. Next, we're going to talk about an alternative perspective that Malcolm X and Black Power bring to the civil rights movement, and how it comes to an end, or at least fades in the American mindset.